Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J, and today we wanted to take another look at Netflix's She-Ra. This time around we wanted to talk about Kyle, one of the forgotten Horde kids, along with Lonnie and Rogelio. We'll get to them in another video, so keep an eye out for that. Kyle is one of the child soldiers forced to work under the Horde. The evil Horde collects orphans, and they're probably the ones that made them orphans to begin with. Then they train them to be child soldiers and force them to fight on their behalf, while also lying to them, pretending that they're the good guys who are trying to liberate Etheria from the princesses, even though the princesses are actually the rightful rulers of the planet. So these kids are being abused mentally, physically, and emotionally, constantly being gaslit, and robbed of their childhood. We found an article where the crew was asked about Kyle. The crew admit that he's meant to be an everyman type of character, but they don't seem to really understand the fundamentals of the everyman trope. Here it says, Kyle started just purely as a joke. I think at the time when I was developing the show, there were a lot of characters who were sort of very boring everymen who tended to take the spotlight from people who seemed like they were maybe a little bit more suited for the role, who was usually a female character. The thing is, the everyman is a very common archetype, because these are characters that have a mass appeal, since they're very relatable to the average audience member. These are typically people who are pretty average but find themselves in extraordinary situations. Characters like Peter Parker, Virgil Hawkins, or Luke Skywalker. And despite the trope's name, it's not limited to only men. For example, there's Bloom from the Winx Club, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, or Courtney Whitmer, aka Stargirl. As far as the everyman being boring, I think they're just missing the point. According to tvtropes.org, everyman characters are not necessarily blank slates, but they are typically more grounded and less wacky than supporting characters. Basically, this trope is focusing more on being relatable than being interesting, especially if the character is meant to be an audience surrogate. In this case, the tropes page says, the audience may find them harmlessly uninteresting and latch onto the action hero, ensemble dark horse, or villain instead, so other more interesting archetypes, which is basically what the crew is describing when they're talking about Kyle and the everyman. Them being less interesting than the supporting cast isn't really a bad thing, and it's not really sexist either, which is what they seem to be implying. They're just meant to be ordinary enough to attract a wider audience, regardless of their gender. Sure, Dorothy may be a little boring when compared to the colorful characters we meet in the merry old land of Oz, but that doesn't really devalue her as a character or her role in the story. There's a reason the everyman has such a wide appeal, not just for audience members but for writers too. It's an archetype that can be mixed with a lot of different tropes. For example, hero is a very common trope to mix it with, which is why it's so common with superheroes, as evident by most of the examples I listed. Another popular combination is the everyman with the underdog. These would include characters like Harry Potter. These are characters that start out at a very low point, like Harry being abused by the Dursleys and made to live in a cramped cupboard under the stairs, but he's eventually able to escape that abuse when he is called to his extraordinary circumstance, in this case being accepted to Hogwarts. This is also the kind of trope that Kyle falls into. Of the Horde squad, Kyle gets the most screen time, and I would say we learned the most about him of all the Horde kids who aren't Catra and Adora. Kyle really isn't cut out for the Horde. He's not very strong or fast, and he's pretty clumsy, which are problems when he's stuck growing up with the abusive Horde, who values military might, and pretty much everyone gives him a hard time, including his teammates, like if he's slowing them down in a training exercise. But he also gets blamed for things that really aren't his fault, most likely because he makes for an easy scapegoat. But despite all of this, he does keep trying. He actually has a pretty good attitude, all things considered. He displays a tenacity that wouldn't necessarily be expected from someone in his situation, even if it goes unrecognized. These are traits that are common among the everyman archetype. He does keep trying to follow orders as best as he can. Despite the constant bullying, he doesn't seem to hold it against everyone else, but he does recognize that it's wrong. In episode 9, he brings food to Bo, who's a prisoner at the time, and Bo asks what his name is. He's really taken aback by this because nobody's ever shown him any kindness, even though Bo only asks for his name. Bo starts asking about Glimmer, who's also been captured by the Horde, and asks Kyle if he'll help him. Kyle runs off at first because that's treason, and he could get into a lot of trouble if he did help, but Kyle does come back, and he gives Bo a lot of valuable information, which is a pretty big deal because nobody in the Horde actually trusts him with information, so he had to actively seek this himself, which is a choice that he made, which he really didn't have to. He doesn't have to stick his neck out for the rebellion, but he is able to recognize that Adora has a better life now that she's out of the Horde, and he believes that the same could be true for himself, so he goes out of his way to find out where Glimmer is and what the Horde plans on doing with her, and gives this really valuable information to the rebellion, and only asks that he be liberated in return. He even asks to be Bo's friend, which Bo agrees to, and it seems genuine enough, even though he is a prisoner at this time, but Kyle did just prove himself. Plus, Kyle is not a threat to Bo, and he's not really the one who's holding him hostage. They're both trapped in this situation, and here's a chance that they could both escape. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. Bo gets rescued by the rebellion, but leaves Kyle behind, and doesn't even tell them that he's how he got the information they needed on Glimmer. This actually never comes up again. The only other time they interact in the series is when Bo kicks Kyle's butt in the D&D episode, and then celebrates, despite Kyle having no physical strength and being no threat. Kyle never brings it up again either, not that he can in the Horde, but it would have been nice if he and Bo had been able to have another conversation at some point, maybe actually become friends. Instead, Kyle goes back to being the Horde's punching bag, constantly being bullied and abused when he doesn't deserve it, and he ends up stuck in the Horde until his entire team decides to leave in the end of season 4. It seems Kyle is pretty desperate to get out of there, but he isn't able to do it on his own. He probably doesn't have the confidence, and since the other kids aren't treated as bad as he is, they're not as desperate to leave, until Catra eventually pushes them so far that they all decide to leave. I still think they could have easily faked their deaths in the Whispering Woods, but they did eventually manage to leave. I guess that's what matters. So in the end, Kyle was meant to poke fun at the Everyman archetype, and it's fine to deconstruct something that's popular in media, except it didn't really seem like the crew understood what the Everyman was, so it's kind of hard to deconstruct something in that case. Plus, the whole joke with him was that he was getting bullied a lot, and it's not really cool to joke about something like that. Plus, the whole thing kind of comes off as disingenuous to begin with. Like in the article, they say, in any other story, Kyle would have been the one to find the sword, but this isn't any other story. It's She-Ra. Since She-Ra and the Princesses of Power is a reboot of an 80s show, and the original show already had a strong female character as its lead, just saying. At the end of this section, the crew says that they eventually grew to love all their characters, including Kyle and the other Horde kids, so it's nice that he finally got a break from just being a punching bag, but at the same time he never reached his full potential, which is pretty disappointing, especially considering the fact that they dedicated a whole episode to these 3 characters, but it was mostly filler, with only a few scenes that actually meant something, and at the end of it they just go back to what they were doing before, only for them to leave episodes later. Why give them character development and then hold off on doing anything with it? Or in this case, nothing with it, since they only had a small cameo in season 5. It could have had some small moments of them exploring the outside world, or even reuniting with Adora. But basically what we're saying is that Kyle deserved better, and while the Everyman might not be as interesting as other character archetypes and tropes, they have a value to them due to their wide appeal, since they cover universal themes that anyone can relate to or sympathize with regardless of our culture or what we are. So that was our opinion. What do you guys think? We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment down below. Before we go, we'd like to give a shout out to our members: Caleb Nelson, Stutania, Tyrant Carnivore, Adam K, Shiny Orc Boy, Taylor Ramirez, The Rabbit Mancer, Dash Hound, Haley Kosheva, Ray Thulu, Hunter Rose, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samru163, and Kopitio Bozinski. If you'd like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more content from us. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone. Bye guys.